Good morning. You always face the crowd and say good morning? I learned that in homiletics. What's homiletics? I don't know. No, it's learning to speak in public back in college in those days. You always speak to the back of the crowd so that the front for sure hear you and the back hears you. So anyway, we've got a good sound system, so we're good with that. All right. Some exciting things happening, right? First of all, we're going to do the tailgate party next week, right? Unlike the Vikings, we have a tailgate party that we can celebrate at, and we're going to do that because God has provided what you see out there. And it was fun watching the guy do the lines this week, get them all straight, and that type of thing. So after next week, we're going to do our tailgate party. So bring a grillable for your family and a side dessert. If you got a gas grill and you're able to bring it, bring one. Wes isn't here, but he told me to bring his big barbecue too, but just in case. Okay? Bring your own lawn chairs, a pop-up for the sun if you wish, because it's going to be sunny. Right? Oh, and if you do bring a pop-up, you're not allowed to nail it into the pavement, okay? Bring your sandbags or whatever you need to hold it down, that kind of a thing. Okay, bring some games, cornhole, pickleball, frisbee golf, sidewalk chalk, non-lethal and non-poisonous lawn darts. I threw that in there just to be silly. But anyway, nowadays lawn darts might give you a bump on the head, but hey, I grew up when they were dangerous, right? Anybody grew up when lawn darts were dangerous? I'll show you sometime on my shoulder. I'm just kidding. All right. The church will provide paper, products, condiments, and drinks. Did we agree to that? Drinks? Okay, we're gonna have drinks there too. Not like a Vikings tailgate party, okay, but a church tailgate party. All right. So, were you okay coming in today and parking between lines? Because it's kind of been like park wherever you want for a long time, right? So, got to go between the lines now. I just think it looks so sharp, and you don't know how many of my friends driving by have just said, wow, things are happening there. Well, it's a little deeper than 4 inches of what do you call that? Pavement, right? Asphalt. Tarmac, whatever you want to call it. Don't land your plane on there, though. Anyway, it's deeper than that, what's going on here, right? It's all about engaging one another as believers and God himself through Christ. Okay? But we have an opportunity because we're going to look at this as a tool. It's not holy ground out there. As a tool that God has given us to use. So, the elders, which includes me and my crazy ideas, we're going to introduce a community pickleball thing for the month of August and September. When are we going to do this? Well, we're going to use the parking lot to connect, and I think it's a great opportunity. Has anybody heard of pickleball?
Is that where you turn a pickle into a ball?
No, it's not, but pickleball is not tennis. You don't have to be in shape to run around the court, and you don't have to be agile like badminton. It's a low net with a ball that doesn't go too fast, and it's kind of a craze right now where any age can play it. And they do have courts in town, but I think it'd be a great opportunity. We've got the room out there to chalk in some courts week to week where people can just come and play and hang out. And it's a great opportunity for us to connect with our community with a purpose, okay? So, Wednesday evenings, August to September, about 6 o'clock, I think what we can do is tell people, bring a grillable. We'll have barbecues if you want, that type of a thing. And it's an engagement opportunity with a purpose. What's the purpose? Well, we aren't going to present the gospel every Wednesday night. We're going to connect with people. But you know what? They're going to have to come in and use the bathroom and that kind of thing. That's where we're going to have our things up about this October, Lord willing. If you've been fasting on Fridays, we know it's God's will to do evangelism. We're not praying, God, show us your will that way. No, we're asking God to show us how should we do evangelism? How do we engage people? How do we do that? As they come in and use our facilities, that kind of a thing, we're going to have stuff up talking about a foundations course, time together in God's Word to help people understand what it's all about. And we're putting materials together for that, and we'll have those ready for that. So, I'm excited about this, and we're going to need lots of volunteers, because, volunteers to come and play, engagement, right? People to help with logistics, that type of thing. If you've never played pickleball before, we will have a court for you, because you can learn to play pickleball, okay? But it's about engagement with people. This is, call it a craze if you want, throughout the country. There are pickleball courts. There are pickleball courts on top of tennis courts everywhere now. Well, we got some room out there. We can engage the community and make those good connections that, people are really longing for out there. And again, it's just September or August and September. We're not doing it through the winter. Not in here or anything. No, this is just, we have an opportunity. Let's take advantage of it and see what God does to help us connect with those around us. All right, so let's get to work today. For those of you that are visiting, because I met some people again today that have cabins in the area, so they're here spending some time with us, which is wonderful. You're very welcome to be here. And we are going through and have been going through, this is our 16th Sunday, talking about foundations, all the way from the beginning of the Bible, working our way through, in particular, understanding God's plan for the Redeemer and how we fit into that. And so that's a lot of lessons that if you're jumping in today and your first time, you can go to our online website, which, by the way, the webmaster, you know who our webmaster is? Is he here? Don't see him here. Caden Odegaard is our webmaster. And he's helping me get the website up and looking better, more interactive. If you go to our events page, it's got scrolling events across it now. We've got VBS, Women's Bible Study, Kelly's teaching Sunday mornings, and it's scrolling across the screen. It looks awesome, and we're going to do lots more. And anyway, all that to say, if you want to go back to our first lesson, way back in March, is that when we started? You can go back and watch all of those. They're all set aside under teachings on our website. You just click that tab there and look at previous teachings. All right, but today we are on the Passover. Now, I like social media. I did my little crazy video this week talking about our chickens. They didn't get a Passover. They all died yesterday. Went to a better place in our freezer. Okay? I woke up this morning like, do I need to feed the chickens? And I was like, oh, I don't have to feed chickens today. But then my son ordered 50 more, so I got a couple weeks off here, and then we'll be back at it. But anyway, I put those little videos out on Facebook each week, and please share them, that we're going to be covering the Passover, because it's a pivotal part in understanding the Old Testament. Okay? Well, every part is, but the Passover is an amazing story because it's still celebrated every Friday, especially in Israel. Right? The Shabbat, and understanding what God did for Israel. Big, big, big deal. So that's where we're at, and that fits in. Each Sunday I show our little building blocks that we're putting together here. And we're in that section, the red section up there, the Redeemer, which is most of the Old Testament, because everything points towards the Redeemer, the rescuer of man, okay? Everything points towards that. That's why my dear Jewish friends and people that don't accept Christ as their Messiah, I'm like, everything's pointing that direction, like everything. Look back. It's all in place. All right, but let's do our review first from last week, which, trying to cover the life of Joseph in one Sunday is not very easy. But let's go through the situation and the attitude of the persons that in that situation. So we had Joseph, who was the youngest, the favored. That was the truth. Okay? What was his attitude? Probably arrogant. Young kid, daddy loves him, gives him a nice coat, goes and gets a report on how his brothers are doing. Yeah, I could feel a little prickly about that myself. Okay? The other brothers were not favored like Joseph was, and it tells us they had hateful and vengeful speech. We talked about that and their actions eventually too, that didn't justify their actions. Oh, he did this, I'm okay doing this. No, that's not how it works in the Bible. Okay? It doesn't work that way. You don't blame people for your actions, right? Okay, so they sold their brother into slavery. And they were like, let's get rid of the problem. Well, that's what they were thinking, but God had something else in mind, of course. Okay, he was in a situation where he was wrongly accused in the household of Potiphar. Joseph stands in the truth. Such an important life principle. If I stand in the truth before God, anything can happen to me, and I'll be okay. Standing in the truth. All right? Then he's thrown into prison, because she said, kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, but what was his reaction to that? It was a mature reaction. Joseph started growing from the time he had the coat of many colors and his attitude with that. He's in prison, and he's growing. He's maturing. It's a process. Not a fun one by any means, okay? But anyway, then he's promoted up right underneath Pharaoh. Who would have thought that could have happened? And you know what? He probably wasn't thinking about, well, someday I'm going to be, oh yeah, those dreams I had. Okay, God, can you kind of hurry up with those? I don't know, but that was years in the process. Can be under those circumstances for a long time. Anyway, but that's when he was ready as God's placement, right? God's placement to preserve the line of Abraham, which God had promised, all nations on earth will be blessed through you. This is the biblical sovereignty of God in action. And during that is the biblical responsibility of man, making those choices, not understanding the sovereignty of God, but holding on to his promises and looking forward. Okay? So God put him in place, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that happened there. I love reading the story when he reveals who he is. I would have just loved to have been a fly on the wall to look. Well, I would have had my phone out recording it. The response on the brothers' faces, that would have been priceless. Like, it could have been like, uh-oh. Or, yeah, because they knew what they deserved. But in maturity and God placing him there, Joseph was ready to turn it into a beautiful reaction. It's beautiful. And believe you me, we'll come back to that many times for good principles for growing in our faith and our walk with God. Okay, so we're going to read some verses now. And Scott, you know what I didn't do? I didn't put them all in order. I don't know where they are out there. So we'll find them. Exodus 11, 1, 4 through 7.
The Lord said to Moses, "Yet one plague more I will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterward, he will let you go from there. When he lets you go, he will drive you away completely." So Moses said, "Thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle. There shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there has never been, nor ever will be again. But not a dog shall growl against any of the people of Israel, neither man or beast, that you may know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel.
Thank you. Exodus 12, 3-7.
Tell the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb according to their fathers' houses, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of persons. According to what each can eat, you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male, a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight. Then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it.
Thank you. And then we have Exodus 12, 12-13 and 28.
For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. And then the people of Israel went and did so, as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did.
Okay, Exodus 12, 29-32.
At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat in his throne, and to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Then he summoned Moses and Aaron by night and said, Up, go out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel. And go, serve the Lord, as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also.
And Exodus 12, 40-42. Way up here.
The time that the people of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, on that very day, all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It was a night of watching by the Lord to bring them out of the land of Egypt. So this same night is a night of watching kept to the Lord by all the people of Israel throughout their generations.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what we're going to go through here this morning is a quick synopsis of the Passover. Israel not excused from this plague. Oh, but they were. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Specific instructions were given. Okay, you must be behind the door, the blood. Okay, God always does what he says, and God fulfills a promise. And then lastly, of course, what should this story mean to you? All right, a quick synopsis up to the Passover. Now, I'm not going to read all these verses, but I thought it was important to give you a little bit leading up to this. And the start of that is Israel was to be out of Egypt in 430 years. Now, I did some study on that, and I was thinking, I've always thought they were in Egypt 430 years, and then they got out. It's actually from the time the promise went to Abraham to when they came out was 430 years, because the promise was, at that point, I will bring you out of Egypt. It was pretty interesting going through researching that out. So, all right, there was a new Pharaoh in town, we know from Exodus chapter 1. And he did not remember Joseph and all the great things that had happened. A change in circumstance. Yeah. How many times do we face a change in circumstances that's not going to go in our favor, so to speak, right? So that's what happened there, and things got really difficult for the children of Israel. Then Moses is brought on to deliver in Exodus 3:10. Another miraculous story of his mother, putting him in the basket and in the Nile River. Now, if you've ever lived on a river, that's not a very safe thing to do. But God directed them that way. That he was special, and they knew it, and they put him in that basket. And lo and behold, what happens, of course, is his own mother looks after him. Pretty awesome. Okay, and then, of course, when Moses goes to request a delivery of the Israelites, God brings on the plagues. Now, we don't have time to go through all of those plagues right now. We're just going to cover the last one. All right? So, then we see that Pharaoh, after all those plagues, he still does not change his mind. God intervenes at certain times and hardens his heart. Yes. Is God allowed to do that? God can do whatever he wants. Do I get ticked off at that? Well, I better change my attitude about it, because he can do what he wants. He's sovereign. He's in charge. Okay? So, that's our quick synopsis leading up to this. Then let's cover Israel not excused from this plague. So, this plague was the last straw. God says in 11:1 there, "Now the Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here, and when he does, he will drive you out completely." Again, God's in charge here. He's going to show who he is through the response of Pharaoh. You cannot stand up to God. You're going to lose. Is that good news? Not really. It's bad news, but it's good bad news. Why? Because if you accept the bad news, you can accept the good news. If you don't accept the bad news as being applied to you, you're just going to get bad news. Got that equation? A little complicated, but no. Just believe God. That's what it comes down to, right? Okay, the whole land of Egypt would be affected. It says in verses 4-7 there. All people in Egypt would come under this judgment. And that's why I say Israel's not excused from it. Of course, God gives them the instructions, we'll get into in a little bit here. But the plague of the firstborn dying and God coming throughout the land of Israel covers everybody. God in his judgment, it comes to everybody. If there had been an Israelite that said, I'm not doing that, his firstborn would have died. Because he wouldn't have been behind what? The blood. Okay? That's what I mean when I talk about it comes under them, and they're not excused from it. The only protection was God's solution. Now, where did we hear that before? Oh, yeah. The coats of skin for Adam and Eve, right? That was the only thing acceptable, was God's solution for them. Let's see. Oh, Abel and his lamb. The only thing that was the acceptable solution was for that lamb to die in his place. They had to believe and act. Okay? Noah's Ark. Who outside the ark survived? Kids, do you know? Give me one name. No, outside the ark. There isn't one name, right? There is not a name that survived outside the ark. Now we're coming to this story as well, and it's either you believe or you don't believe. You don't believe, there are consequences. If you believe, there are consequences. One bad, one good. All right, so God would provide that solution. Israel would have suffered if God had not provided a solution for them. Yeah, their firstborn would have all died as well. But God in His grace gives them what they don't deserve, a solution to the situation that's coming, to the judgment that is coming. Same as Noah and the ark. Did Noah have to build the ark? Yeah, but we know that was so miraculous that only God could have helped him build that ark. And the solution was for anybody that believed and stepped in. Same with this. God has a solution. We believe. That is faith. We act upon it. All right. God is merciful and gracious, but He's always specific on the instructions. And if you missed Sunday school again today, I'll tell you what. God is in Galatians. It is specific. You're either going to believe what He said or you're going to pay for it yourself. And it's not a good thing to pay for by yourself because only God's solution is going to work for you, right? So God in His mercy, He's merciful and gracious and gives them a solution. All right, so that's what I meant by Israel's not excused from this plague. They still had to believe what God said. And then He gives His specific instructions. Okay? The time and person was specific in verse 3 of 12 there. It says, tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day, the time, so they're not going to be mixed up, of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one per household. Okay? So, provision was made for small households as we read in this, because remember, God doesn't play the blame game. He always provides a solution for you. So if somebody said, well, we can't afford a lamb, God has a solution for that. You could partner up with another family. That's God and His grace right there. So that says that in verse 4. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people who are there. You already determined the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. So there's a bit of planning involved, but God has provided a solution if you can't afford a lamb or if you're too small or whatever the situation there. But we're going to see the specific instructions. If you're not behind the blood eventually, it's not going to work out so good for you. Okay, in verse 5, had to be a lamb without any blemish. The animal you choose must be a year-old male without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. I didn't remember reading that before, but anyway, take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Okay? A lamb without blemish. Where did we see that before? The ram that took Isaac's place, caught by the horns so that its body wasn't damaged in any way. And as I mentioned before, thorns in the wilderness. Hey folks, Canadian thistle isn't a thorn, even though it kind of gets prickly, right? No. You need to leave North America to get into some thorns really bad. I mean, there are probably some down in the desert I don't know about. It's not like we go and hug cacti or cactuses, that kind of a thing. But that ram was caught by its horns because in the wilderness, in that area, you will get shredded if you go through some bushy areas. I've had the wonderful privilege of hiking through the jungle. And if you're a Vietnam veteran, my heart goes out to you and thank you for being a veteran. I went through the jungle, come out, ears bleeding, hats torn, clothes are torn. Not on the tribal people, just the clumsy white guy that's making his way through the bush. It's hard, right? But God said, without blemish, nothing is wrong with it. It had to be a perfect substitute, a perfect lamb. Okay, just like Isaac's substitute, a 1-year-old male. Do you realize that cost people? Because I don't know if you've tried to wean or take a baby goat away from its mother. I don't know what the right combination of milk to give it is, but if it's not, goats are really sensitive that way. I don't know about sheep, but you spend a whole year investing in that lamb, and it's got to be perfect, no blemish. Yeah, it's an investment. Okay, and it could be a sheep or a goat lamb that God said there. All right, the time of death was specific. In verse 6 there, take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people of the community in Israel must slaughter them at twilight. So, the 14th day at twilight. Okay, and the placement of the blood was specific. Verse 7. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and top of the doorposts of the houses where they eat the lamb. So, the lamb had to die. That's in there because you're not going to get the blood out of it otherwise. It had to die, right? And the blood had to be visible on the doorposts. Is this pretty? No, it's not pretty. It's actually showing death. But it's what God required at this time was that death has to be visible. If the death is not visible, those inside the house, the firstborn of them, would die. It's specific. You don't get to determine the concessions. There are no concessions. You believe and you act upon it. You put your faith in what God has said and you act upon it. Okay? Just like going into the ark. Remember? They had never even seen rain. But God says He's going to judge the earth and wipe every living being off of it. I believe Him. He's provided this. I just step in. Okay? Step into the boat. I've got friends going to the ark this next week. And I know there are people in here that were just there, Palin and Julie. We got to take a group out there sometime. I do. I think we should do that sometime. There it is. It's announced. All right, so they had to take that blood, and there are more details. We're just covering the details of getting it on the doorposts because I guess, what do you call it nowadays? Brick mold on the sides and the header. Is that how you say things like that? I don't know. The header. Usually you don't see the header on our houses now, but if you go to a third world country that builds with mud brick or anything like that, the header is usually exposed. Now, if you got a little more money, they cover it up with plaster or something like that. But anyway, they had to put it across the top and down the two sides. Highly visible. Okay? All right. Now, then God said, you need to be behind the blood. God would bring the judgment. Verse 12. Flip over there for a second. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, both men and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. So he will pass through the country. I will strike down the firstborn. I will execute judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. There's no wiggle room in this whatsoever. You must believe in order to be passed over. There's no other way. When God sees the blood, he will pass over in verse 13. Okay? The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. If God saw you, you would see death. Think about that. How many times do you hear somebody talking about how good they are? And that's how they're going to go to heaven. No, if God sees you, you die. Okay? If God does not see the blood, in this case, the firstborn of that household and the firstborn of all the livestock will die. There's no exception. Okay? If God saw blood, you saw life. No judgment. Think about that for a second. God's providing a solution for life. If you provide the solution, you see death. If God provides a solution, you see life. It's not complicated. So again, God would allow a substitute to die to not come under the judgment that he was bringing. It's beautiful. It was a simple solution. Believe and stand behind the door. It's that simple. Why does God make it simple? Because we can't do anything unless he makes a solution. We love to make it complicated. We do. And in complicating things, what happens? God's going to see you. You will die. Take the simple solution he provides, trust in it, be behind it, you don't die. And it was available to all those who would believe. I have no doubt that if an Egyptian was overhearing a couple Israelites talking about the details of this, and they put blood on the doorposts of their house, they would not have come under the judgment of God. That's faith. Now, we don't have a recording of somebody doing that, I don't think. No. Because their gods had blinded them to what was about to take place. All right. So the Israelites believed God. It says in verse 28 there. Then the people bowed down and worshiped. The Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. So they believed the preacher, if you want to say that. They believed the message that came. They took it as the message from God himself, who was bringing the judgment, and then acted upon it. Okay? All right. So you had to be behind the blood. Does God always do what he says? Absolutely. He brought death to the unbelieving. In verse 29. Oops, I flipped over too early here. Verse 29, at midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Okay? So God struck all of Egypt. Where was Israel? In Egypt. God struck them all down. The firstborn of Pharaoh, no excuse. No solution for Pharaoh. Remember we talked about last week, the pharaohs, I'll tell you what, unbelievable how arrogant they were. When we were in Egypt, we were going along with our Egyptologists, and we came to this one place, Nefertari, or I can't remember. Anyway, great big long stairway up to this palace type thing in the Valley of the Kings, and you walk up there, and you get up there, and you're looking at all the hieroglyphics, and there are hieroglyphics with the faces rubbed out of them. I'm like, what's going on here? Who did that? Is that like, not graffiti, vandalism? And our Egyptologist that was with our group, he said, no. If you're able to read this, you can read the story that's going on is either the next Pharaoh or whoever came afterwards and didn't like them. Maybe it was a situation of them taking over, because I'll tell you what, I've never watched Game of Thrones. I don't really care to, but when it comes to being in power, you're going to kill people, okay? So here are these hieroglyphics, and the, trying to remember the name, the esophagus, cartouche. They're little egg-shaped things like this, and it has a little story in there about what king that is, and every one of them, that's kind of his seal. Face is rubbed off of his character because whoever took over went back and like, you're getting rubbed out, buddy, getting rubbed out of history. You know the big monoliths, those big, tall, sharp things? One was covered over the bottom part for thousands of years, and when they took the cover off of it, same thing. One of the subsequent pharaohs covered the part on the monolith that had the story of the previous king. So you can actually see it's bleached on the top from thousands of years in the sun, and below it's nice and clean. It's just like, anyway. But they were so proud. You have to be to stay in power. You think different than me, you die. You don't do what I say, you die. The only one that has the right for that is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the creator of the universe. And Pharaoh, how big are you now as you're holding your firstborn son that has died? You could have believed. Okay? You're not immune to the judgment of God outside of faith in what he has said. None of us are. Pride. You don't win against God. The firstborn of the slave and the prisoner, their firstborns died. The firstborn of even the livestock died. The Passover was available to all who would believe. Okay? God's solution for them. All right. But Pharaoh did become a believer. 12:30, what does it say? I'm going to explain that in a second here, of course. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. Okay? Those that don't believe when the judgment comes, when the end comes, will believe. We know that from some stories in the New Testament. You're going to believe at some point. But God does have a timetable. And if you don't believe before his judgment, you're going to believe afterwards, but it's too late. And that's exactly what happened with Pharaoh. He could not ignore the death because his own firstborn had died. He could no longer hold on to what God said, let go of. He was not in control like he thought he was. Where a whole kingdom for millennia, everything done was done for the Pharaoh. Everything. If you get to go to Egypt, go and see it. It is mind-boggling. Everything was done, but he could not hold on to his firstborn outside of the provision of what God provided. Okay? So Pharaoh caves and lets Israel go in 12:31 to 32. You don't ever win against God. All his free labor, which, by the way, the Israelites did not build the pyramids. They built the mud ramps to build everything surrounding the pyramids. Why? Because Pharaoh would never let slaves touch his stuff. But the mud and bricks, that's what Scripture says. They had to make mud and bricks. And you can go there and actually see ramps that were made and unfinished stuff by pharaohs because some conqueror came in, more likely down around the time when the Greeks and Romans started showing up. There's a ramp, it's still sitting there of mud and bricks. That's what the slaves in Egypt did. They didn't build the pyramids. No, they had all their architects. Everything's perfect. It's amazing. It was not done by them. But anyway, all that to say, you don't ever win against God. He will settle the score on his terms and in his time. Okay? All right. Then God fulfills a promise. So God kept Israel in Egypt until the end of the 400 years. In 1240, it says, now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt, because the Lord had kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt. And this is the night that the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for generations to come. So on that very day, it tells us, he brought them out. And for millennia, the night of watching has been celebrated. The Passover. Absolutely. Bringing them out of Egypt and the miracle that took place. Why was it a miracle? Because it was an impossible situation for the Israelites to get themselves out of Egypt. It wasn't going to happen unless God intervened. Okay? So, how do you fit into this story? My wife said I was only allowed to ask 2 questions. What are you hiding behind? It's kind of a trick question because the question is, do you know you need to be behind something? Because what did we say earlier? If God sees you, you are dead. So that pertains to our salvation. Of course it does. We are behind the blood of Christ. He does not see me, right? But it's a good thing to take even into our daily lives. Do I stand behind God's solutions for me? I might not see them, like with Joseph in the prison. Did that stop him from walking with God each day and trusting God? Apparently not, because God elevated him right underneath Pharaoh. That is unbelievable. And with the Israelites, they had to choose to believe what God had said so that he saw the blood. Okay? And we talked a bit about this, and I want you to ask yourself, when is it too late to believe God? Well, if you're no longer here on this earth, you're going to believe. But that's too late. And again, this can be brought into just our daily lives too. When is it too late to believe God? We might not get that answer when he brings a solution. It might take time. But right now, we believe that he's going to provide a solution in our daily lives. Yeah. What's that called? Relationship. That's what I'm most concerned about, is that I'm walking with God right now. Because whether I have good circumstances or bad circumstances, I can trust him with the solutions. So take those questions with you this week and think back on this story of the Passover, which is very familiar to all of us, I'm sure. But do your own deep dive on it and look at it and see what God teaches your heart through it. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you again as we look at the Passover that you have not made things complicated. You give instructions that are specific, they're timely. We simply have to choose to believe what you have said. Thank you that your Son, Jesus Christ, is the perfect Passover lamb for us, that we can hide behind his work, the shedding of his blood, that you don't see us. And Lord, for those that don't understand that, to understand that if God does see you, you don't have a good outcome, because it's not what he's provided. So make that clear in our hearts and help us to live accordingly. In Jesus' name, amen.